It is 10:20 on Wednesday, October 20th. We will call this meeting of the Tennessee Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers to order. Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Here.
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 Here. Here. Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. We will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
All right, we'll take a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. McKinney. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our September 14th, 2021 meeting or to amend them as necessary.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented by Mr. Harris. Do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Berry. All right. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. I have this strange feeling that someone's looking over my shoulder.
Mr. Rom?
Are you with us, Mr. Rom?
Yes.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I caused a delay.
Quite all right. I don't believe it was your doing. Moving on to the legal report, we're pleased to have Chief Counsel for Regulatory Boards Division, Mr. Anthony Glandorf, with us today, and we also have the Associate General Counsel of Regulatory Boards, Mr. Troy Bryant. So, Mr. Glandorf, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to stand up and address the board, if I may, just momentarily. At the last meeting, I indicated to you all that we had been in the process of hiring a new attorney for this board to assist with the day-to-day legal advice activities along with presentation of the legal report as a disciplinary counsel. And so I'm pleased to introduce you all today to Mr. Troy Bryant, who's sitting in front of you, who has been with us for approximately a month now. Troy has been selected to provide legal advice day-to-day as a program attorney for not only the funeral board, but also our cemetery and pre-need programs. So his responsibilities and duties will be all things within that industry, as I like it to be, so that we can have a consolidated effort between the professions. And he will also be presenting the disciplinary actions, the legal reports to this board and also to those other programs. So he's been here about a month. I have given him a fire hose of education within this industry. As most of our attorneys, he's not been aware of this industry prior to. So we had a combined effort to work on this legal report to you all. So I'm going to have Mr. Bryant is going to present it to you. I'm going to be here to help answer all of those questions that you may have. As always, if we cannot answer that question for you today, I would just ask that we be given an opportunity to go back and find that answer if it would make a decision as to your approval or disapproval or whatnot. I will say that Troy's history is that he is a graduate of University of Tennessee School of Law. And he was most recently employed, and this is where we brought him from, that he was clerking as a law clerk in Rutherford County court systems for both a judge and a chancellor down there, where he was doing good work, and we convinced him to do that here on our side of things. So with that, I introduce you to him, and if you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer those right now.
Questions?
Great. Thank you all. And hearing none, we'll go ahead and start with your legal report.
Welcome. And Mr. President, I was made aware this week that it would be prudent for me to recuse myself from the legal report today. So let the record reflect that I will be recused from the legal report.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. We'll start with number 1, which is complaint number 2021052911. This is a complaint made by the county medical examiner for Luca, Mississippi. Complainant, as county medical examiner, certified the death of an inpatient in Luca, Mississippi on May 24th, 2021. The decedent was transferred to respondent's facilities in Memphis. The complainant alleges that as of June 30th, 2021, respondent has yet to complete the death certificate. Further, complainant made repeated calls to respondent that were not answered, providing only an automated recording that did not allow for a message or callback number to be left. Respondent indicated that they had released the death certificate on July 1st, 2021, the same day they received the letter regarding the complaint. Respondent stated that the state of Mississippi has not allowed funeral homes to pick up death certificates in person due to COVID-19 and thus must be ordered through VitalCheck, a process that respondent claims may take anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks. A recommendation would be a $750 civil penalty for unprofessional conduct for failing to treat members of the public in a respectful manner and for an unreasonable delay in filing the death certificate. Authorize settlement and via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Point of clarification, is it possible that that could be Iuka, Mississippi, IUKA instead of Luca, Mississippi? I'm not familiar with Iuka, Mississippi, but there is an Iuka, Mississippi in North Mississippi, and I wonder if that is, you may not have any way to verify that, but
I believe, from my recollection from the complaint, it was listed as a Luca, Mississippi. That could certainly be a typo on the complainant's part, but I'm not certain on that.
Just a question. It looks like this is the 5th complaint in 3 short years. Is there a reason why the $750 might not be a higher amount there?
The intent, or I guess the focus on the 750 was simply as I had gone through the disciplinary history. 750 was essentially the preceding amount from the previous $500. I do see that there was a much larger penalty. The 750 was essentially just an increase from those. Would not recommend against or be opposed to a higher.
Seems to me we're seeing a repeat of this individual over and over. It's just my opinion.
This is Charles. I'm assuming that was Mr. Harris speaking. I agree with you, Anthony. I think it needs to be no less than 1,000.
Yes, sir, I agree with you, and I'm going to make that into a motion to raise the penalty to 1,000 and leave the rest of it as is.
I'll second your motion.
we have a motion by Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. Rahm to increase the civil penalty for unprofessional conduct to $1,000. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And since we have one that is virtual today, we'll have to do a roll call vote. So my apologies for that. So Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skell-Haynes, Clark McKinney, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Next complaint.
Number 2 is 2021054591. Complainant/daughter of the deceased submitted a complaint against respondent, the funeral establishment, alleging unprofessional conduct and delay of death certificate. The complainant states that their father passed away on March 27, 2021, and alleges that they contacted the respondent numerous times regarding the status of their father's death certificate. Complainant states that they were advised by respondent that the medical examiner refused to sign the death certificate due to uncertainty of the deceased's cause of death. Complainant alleges that respondent failed to follow up with the coroner's office regarding the status of the death certificate. Further, complainant contends that respondent wrongly made complainant and their sister financially responsible for their father's services as his beneficiaries. The respondent stated that on March 30th, 2021, they sent all necessary information to the medical examiner. On April 14th, 2021, the medical examiner returned to the case, refusing to sign the death certificate. Respondent then searched for a doctor or certifier and eventually contacted the examiner's office for help. After enlisting the examiner's office, respondent sent the death certificate to them on June 17th, 2021, where it was signed the following day. Respondent states that occasionally death certification takes longer in some cases than in others, and that the next of kin, the deceased wife, had not contacted them regarding any issues relating to the death certificate. Additionally, respondent contended that as the beneficiaries, complainant, and their sister were required to provide information and documentation as a policy of the respondent. The recommendation would be a letter of warning.
This is Charles. Did I understand it correctly that the medical examiner refused to sign it initially, but wound up signing it after no physician could be found to complete the certificate?
My understanding on that, sir, is that the physician did not sign it, and that eventually, through the examiner's office, the respondent was able to get a signature on the death certification. But we do not know for certain if there was a medical examiner.
Did the respondent give any indication why they may have waited on this for 2 months and not more proactive?
No, sir. No specific reasoning. I more so, I believe, just from the nature of their response was the time that it was with the original physician and it was not signed, and then eventually sent back. They suggested that they had been looking around for a while to find somebody who could certify it.
I'd say with the information presented as is, not having a little bit more details, I think that I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation for letter of warning.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. Harris to accept council's recommendation. Is there any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Bryant?
Number 3 is complaint number 2021-054891. Complainant/daughter of the deceased submitted a complaint against respondent, funeral director, alleging unprofessional conduct. Complainant states that her father passed away on July 6, 2012, and was ultimately cremated. Complainant alleges that following the funeral services, respondent agreed to contact complainant or their family when the cremation process was completed in order to pick up their father's remains. Complainant has contacted respondent numerous times as to the whereabouts of the remains, but has been given conflicting information each time. Complainant states that the death certificate identifies the remains location at a veteran cemetery, despite the fact that the family decided to not have the deceased's ashes buried there. Complainant called the cemetery, but the cemetery has no records of the deceased burial there. According to the complainant, the respondent is unable to produce information or records regarding the whereabouts of their father's remains. Respondent indicated that the deceased remains have been located. Respondent stated that they informed complainant that they would need some time to locate their father's records, since the original service had been done 9 years ago. Respondent discovered that they had stored and held the remains for the past 9 years and investigated to confirm that they would be releasing the correct remains to complainant. After confirming this, respondent informed complainant that the remains of their father were available to be picked up at their convenience. And the recommendation for that would be a letter of warning for failing to treat a member of the public in a respectful manner.
Complainant give any detailed reason as to why they waited all this time to contact the respondent about the location of the cremated remains?
No, sir, they did not.
Is
the complaint was filed before the cremains were returned?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Had the respondent tried to reach the family in this matter of time to get those returned, or did they give an explanation of why?
They did not. There was no explanation offered from either party really, and why such a significant delay of time.
Mr. Harris.
Fred, I'm like, I can't believe a funeral home would go that long without trying to reach out to the family to get the liability of those cremains off of my plate.
I think to that question, it was within the complaint and the response. It was obvious that the respondent, when the complainant came to them, the respondent was slightly confused, not sure, because they had there was a death certificate, and then it appears that they then realized that these remains that they had in stored at their location were the ones that they were looking for, and then at the same time there had not been. It seems to be an initial complaint by the complainant that they had said, well, where are these remains at? So it appears that there had been years past before either party was attempting to either, resolve why nobody has picked up these cremains, and then where are the cremains. So that's why when we looked at it, it appeared to me that the complaint had been resolved amongst the parties as to where they needed to be at. And so that's why we recommended a letter of warning in this case, because it didn't appear that the respondent had refused and it didn't appear that they really had a history as to why they had been there and not been picked up.
You.
This is Charles. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of council.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rahm and a second by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation for a letter of warning. Any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skillhanes, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes,
Mr. President, the motion passes.
thank you.
Number 4 is complaint number 2021058661. Complainant / the eldest sibling of the deceased children submitted a complaint against respondent funeral establishment alleging unprofessional conduct. The complaint alleges that complainant, as executor of the deceased will and eldest child of the deceased, contacted respondent numerous times regarding the required information for death certification and to what date it was sent to the state. Complainant alleges that respondent has yet to respond to the request. Likewise, complainant stated that they had previously been in contact with respondent regarding the death and burial of the deceased. Complainant contends that they had not been notified by respondent of the date of burial and service until the deceased had already been buried because, as complainant alleges, respondent wrongly allowed another person to make the arrangements for the deceased. A responsibility that complainant contends was rightfully theirs as executor of the decedent's will. The respondent indicated the following. 1. After the deceased passed, hospice notified respondent as to who the next of kin was, the deceased daughter. 2. Respondent met with the deceased daughter, the stated next of kin, to make arrangements for the deceased. The next of kin never notified respondent that there was another party with equal or greater rights to make decisions. 3. The next of kin requested that no information regarding the decedent's passing would be provided to anyone, and requested that they refuse to confirm whether respondent was even handling the arrangements. Respondent followed this request. 4. Respondent maintains that they answered or responded to each of complainant's calls, but did not provide complainant with any information regarding the decedent in light of the next of kin's request. Complainant provided a rebuttal, stating when complainant attempted to prove their relation to the decedent, respondent refused to accept any of complainant's documentation. Complainant likewise contends that as the oldest of 5 surviving siblings, they fall within the majority of next of kin, whereas the stated next of kin is only one of 2 daughters. Our recommendation would be closure for determination should be made by a court of competent jurisdiction.
This is Charles. I'll make a motion to accept recommendation.
Have a motion by Mr. Rom to accept council's recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any other discussion?
One question there. This is another one of those cases that's like the sixth complaint in 3 years on unprofessional conduct. Is there something from the state level that, we can ask them to do to try to minimize this? Because it seems like it's becoming pretty repetitive with this individual.
On this fuel establishment.
Yes, sir.
I will say that my office is usually within communication with them every other week. They do own more than one funeral establishment, and so I will say that they know of the concerns at the local managerial level, and that they're working to remedy them. I think there's been differences of these issues, but they know of them, and then so my process really, my opinion on it from a disciplinary standpoint is that we have to evaluate each case that comes in as they come in regarding the whether or not there's a violation and how severe the violation there is, and that's generally kind of what we do. If it does get to the point of a extreme or severe violation, like you can see in their history, then we take more severe action. I can say that we have gotten their attention, and I believe that we're taking appropriate action to get their attention right now. You're welcome.
Questions or any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Number 5 is complaint number 2021-06-0151. This complaint was opened by a board field representative's routine inspection. During the inspection, it was determined that the funeral director's license expired on May 31st, 2021, and was not reinstated until August 2nd, 2021. During that time, respondent acted in the capacity of a Tennessee licensed funeral director, including but not limited to making funeral arrangements and/or cremation arrangements for 15 deceased persons. This constitutes a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625309 and Tennessee Code Annotated 625316, subsection A. The respondent replied and apologized for the oversight, stating failure to renew their license was a mistake caused by being preoccupied with the pandemic and was corrected as soon as they became aware of the expiration. And this complaint is related to the below matter number 6. Our recommendation for this one is a $250 civil penalty for aiding and abetting the practice of a business as a funeral director with an expired license.
So is the fine fairly consistent with, I know we've heard these before, and sometimes the violations per incident, per family that was waited on, but is that pretty consistent, the 250?
Yes, my history of how we've done this is that's pretty consistent when there hadn't been a prior violation that we know of. So it was a letter of warning. So usually the first one is $250. If it happened again, then we would look at it from that perspective, whether it's either $500 or per instance if it was just rampant and for over an extended period of time. So those, Mr. Barry, those would be the two differences. So yes, this is consistent with how we've normally done that.
I move that we accept council's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation of $250 civil penalty. Do we have a second?
Second, this is Charles.
All right, we have a second by Mr. Harris and also by Mr. Rom. So, any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you. All right.
Number 6 is complaint number 2021060141. This complaint was opened by a board field representative's routine inspection and is related to number 5 above. During the inspection, it was determined that the funeral director's license expired on May 31st, 2021. It was not reinstated until August 2nd, 2021. During that time, respondent acted in the capacity of a Tennessee licensed funeral director, including but not limited to making funeral arrangements and or cremation arrangements for 15 deceased persons. This constitutes a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625309 and Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625316, subsection A. Respondent replied and apologized for the oversight, stating failure to renew their license was a mistake caused by being preoccupied with the pandemic and was corrected as soon as they became aware of the expiration. A recommendation would be a $250 civil penalty for conducting business as a funeral director with an expired license, authorized settlement via consent order, and a formal hearing if necessary.
Move we accept council's recommendation on this as well.
Motion by Mr. Berry to accept,
Second.
second by Mr. Harris. Any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Continue, Mr. Bryant.
Number 7 is complaint number 2021060721. This complaint was opened by a board field representative's routine inspection. During the inspection, it was determined that the funeral director's license expired on June 30th, 2021, and was not reinstated until July 12th, 2021. During that time, respondent acted in the capacity of a Tennessee licensed funeral director in violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625309 and Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625316, subsection A. Respondent's activity during this time included but was not limited to continuously serving as manager of the establishment while their license was expired, making funeral arrangements and or conducting funeral services for 3 deceased persons. And this complaint is related to the below matter of 2021060731. Our recommendation would be a $250 civil penalty for aiding and abetting the practice of business as a funeral director with an expired license. Authorized settlement via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Make a motion we accept recommendation.
Motion by Mr. Harris. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Number 8 is complaint number 2021060731. This complaint was opened by a board field representative's routine inspection. During the inspection, it was determined that the funeral director's license expired on June 30th, 2021, and was not reinstated until July 12th, 2021. During that time, respondent acted in the capacity of a Tennessee licensed funeral director in violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625309 and Tennessee Code Annotated Section 625316, subsection A. Respondent's activity during this time included but was not limited to making funeral arrangements and or conducting funeral services for 3 deceased persons. Respondent stated that though they were aware that their license had lapsed, they were unable to renew it in a timely manner due to contracting COVID-19. Respondent contends that once they recovered, they renewed their funeral director license. Our recommendation is a $250 civil penalty for conducting business as a funeral director with an expired license, authorized settlement via consent order, and a formal hearing if necessary.
Motion to accept recommendation.
Motion by Mr. Rom to accept council's recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. All right.
Number 9 is complaint number 2021065521. This complaint was opened by a member of the Vital Records and Statistics Division of the Department of Health, alleging unprofessional conduct on behalf of the respondent and alleging that respondent failed to complete and file the death certificates of several cases. Complainant states that respondent is often rude to members of their staff. Likewise, complainant alleges that respondent has yet to have the death certificates of 13 decedents dating back to June 2nd, 2021 at one location, and 6 decedents dating back to May 16th, 2021 at another location in their VRISMQ, and not yet certified by a physician as to the cause of death or filed with the Department of Health. Complainant alleges that respondent has indicated that it is the state's responsibility to get physicians to sign a death certificate. Respondent contends that it is difficult to have doctors sign death certificates at this time, and stated that complainant acknowledged that the death certificates had been sent to doctors for them to sign. Respondents did not deny that they may have been rude with complainant, but asserts that a member of complainant staff was rude initially, causing respondent to respond in kind. Our recommendation would be a $250 civil penalty for unprofessional conduct and for an unreasonable delay in filing death certificates and for failing to treat members of the public in a respectful manner. Authorized settlement via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
This is Charles, Mr. President. I have a question. Do we know what the status of these death certificates, 13 in one location and 6 at another? Have they been certified at this point?
I do not know that information, sir.
Question for council, is it possible for the board to put a time frame on making sure that all of these certificates get filed appropriately?
This is Chief Counsel Tony Glandorf. Yes, we could in the consent order require them to provide us proof of that as part of the agreed disciplinary action that they would send to us, if that's what your suggestion was.
Is there a reason why the penalty's not more than the $250 for that amount of death certificates and conduct?
When we looked at this, I will say that when these complaints come in, we don't really get a lot of other information from the complainant on this. We did kind of speak to try to get some better understanding of what it is. Our office understands the general concept of how this database works, and it's my understanding that it may not be consistent if it's like in Mississippi with our prior complaint that we had or this one here. So we try to rely on the Department of Health to tell us what the status is. For instance, the medical examiner is supposed to sign the death certificate portion, I think, within 48 or 72 hours. And so we should be able to rely that if it's been over 3 days since the death, the doctor should have signed, and it's in a queue waiting for the funeral director to do its portion, is my understanding on that. So based off of that, we did the civil penalty on the limited knowledge that we had of maybe the culpability of that or how many it was. I'm not opposed to a higher civil penalty, but it's hard for me to for my office to determine what is the harm to the public in these instances when the complaint came not from the consumer but from the Department of Health. So not opposed against it. It's just very difficult for my office to weigh how many circumstances that would have been. But with your guidance, we could definitely change that.
Well, just from the complainant's statement alleges that the respondent has indicated that it's a state responsibility to get the physician to sign the death certificate. That's just rogue in its own way.
I think I would like to move with a motion to bump that to 500 and also ask that they have to report back when all of these cases have been filed.
Have a motion by Mr. Harris to increase the civil penalty to $500 and to also require an accounting for each certificate when it is finalized. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. Berry. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skill Haynes,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. All right.
Number 10 is complaint number 2021064091. Complainant, daughter of the deceased, alleges that complainant's aunt was allowed to forge their signature in order to gain possession of their father's belongings. Complainant contends that their aunt and respondent had a personal relationship, and due to the familiarity between the two parties, respondent knew and should have known that the person they were releasing decedent's belongings to did not match the identity of the required signature. Likewise, complainant asserts that in addition to their father's belongings, they made numerous attempts to pick up the deceased file, only to be denied by respondent each time. Respondent stated that they had no recollection of complainant requesting to the deceased file, as they are kept at the front desk and would have been present following the deceased service. Additionally, respondent admits that the decedent's belongings were picked up by complainant's aunt, the sister of the deceased. Respondent states that they were aware complainant's aunt had been the decedent's caregiver and had been handling his affairs. Respondent did not require any signature from the aunt, as it was their general practice to allow next of kin to pick up a decedent's belongings without requiring a signature. Our recommendation would be a $250 civil penalty for knowingly allowing an individual to sign another person's name to a cremation authorization and release of the decedent's belongings to an individual who is not next of kin. Authorized settlement via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Question, Mr. Bryant. I did not note anything in the narrative about signing a cremation authorization form or a forgery on a cremation authorization form. So that also occurred in addition to signing the release, which the respondent indicates is not their practice. I guess I just need clarification on this cremation authorization. If there was a forgery on a cremation authorization form, that to me is a more serious offense than just releasing belongings to an individual other than the immediate next of kin.
For clarification, there was nothing in the complaint that we saw about the cremation authorization form. It appeared from the complaint is that they actually released the belongings, just the belongings of a next of kin that was not authorized to receive those, because they personally knew that individual to have been a next of kin, but it wasn't the. I didn't see anything that would show that that person also had an unauthorized signature on that form. That was not part of the complaint. It was just the picking up of the personal possessions. I think they released those to an unauthorized person, and they knew it at the time because they personally knew that person.
Need to make a correction. Should that be a part of a motion? Is to make a correction to that language in the recommendation?
I think so. I think the confusion was on our part on the bottom recommendation piece. I apologize for that.
Are there any other questions regarding this matter?
In the paperwork, was the daughter listed as the informant? Do we know that? Was she the one that the respondent dealt with?
To my knowledge, sure, that the daughter had interacted with respondent previously and making arrangements and things of that nature, but due to the alleged personal relationship between the aunt and the respondent, the complaint seemed to indicate that the aunt was heavily involved in the process, as well as being allowed to pick up the personal belongings of the deceased when they would not be authorized to do so ordinarily.
Move we move with the recommendation of the 250, but reword it, taking out the cremation authorization portion there.
A motion by Mr. Harris to accept council's recommendation of a $250 civil penalty, but to change the narrative to accurately reflect the circumstances of the case. Do we have
This Charles, I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Rahm. Any further questions or discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale-Haynes, Scotty Porsche, Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes,
Mr. President, the motion passes.
thank you. Next complaint.
And complaints numbers 11, 12, 13, and 14 are all related to the same matter. 11 is complaint number 2021-064721. Complaint number 12, 2021-070321. Complaint 13, 2021-066051. And complaint number 14, 2021-070341. Complaint numbers 11 and 13 were filed by two separate complainants. Complaint numbers 12 and 14 were administratively opened regarding respondents' embalming license. Complainants, the daughter and former wife of the deceased, submitted complaints against respondent, the funeral director, stating that respondent failed to properly care for the deceased in the embalming and funeral services process. Complainants allege that during the funeral service, the casket began to leak bodily fluid and the room was overcome with a strong odor. As complainants contend, respondents did not communicate to them that the decedent had decomposed past the point of embalmment. Additionally, complainants are upset that the funeral director did not notify them that the body of the deceased was not present inside the casket during the visitation. Finally, complainants maintain that in addition to their traumatic experience, respondent charged complainants for services they did not render. Respondent replied, stating that the body of the deceased was far too decomposed for an embalming procedure. Purportedly, respondent explained to complainants that since the deceased had been found 24 hours after their death, along with being COVID-19 positive, decomposition had expedited significantly. Further, respondent contends that they went to great lengths to disguise the odor and absorb any potential fluid by double bagging the body and by using a generous amount of fragrance powder. However, during the service, respondents noticed moisture leaking from the casket. Respondent states that there had been no moisture prior to the service. Regarding the alleged charging of non-rendered services, respondents stated that they in fact rendered services for which they did not charge, but did require a dressing fee due to the additional precautions taken to mask the odor and to mitigate potential leakage. Our recommendation would be a $1,000 civil penalty for unprofessional conduct for failing to properly control decedent's odor and fluid leakage during funeral services, and to be assessed as $500 against respondent's funeral license and $500 against respondent's embalming license. Authorized settlement via consent order and a formal hearing if necessary.
Is there a reason why there's not also something against the establishment here, or was this a funeral director, owner, manager?
We didn't have a complaint open against the establishment. That's consumer generated. Not that we could not, but it's generally not our practice to open one in our office.
Any other questions from the board regarding this matter?
Leakage when they're double bagged. I thought. So the respondent didn't deny that there was leakage. They admitted to that.
Yes, sir. They admitted.
They even express why they hadn't said anything to the family about the condition, or
So the initial issues of the early decomposition, I recall in the complaint that the complainant had expressed a desire to want to see the deceased, and the respondent replied that it would probably not be best due to the state of the deceased. The complainant seemed to suggest that while they were told that, they were not fully informed about quite how severe the state was. So the complainant certainly seemed to suggest that they were surprised by the state of affairs.
I think part of the report also stated that the family was not aware that the deceased wasn't present during the visitation. Right.
That is correct, sir.
Yeah, to me that's really serious. I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation for a $1,000 civil penalty levied as detailed in the recommendation. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scales Haynes, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. And thank you, Mr. Bryant, and welcome to the board. We look forward to working with you in the future, and if we may ever be of any assistance to you, please reach out to us, and we'll be glad to do so. And Mr. Glandorf, we certainly appreciate your guidance during this time while you were searching for a new administrative counsel.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all your comments. And I will say that with my notes here today, I'll report back to the board members, but I've made a note that myself and Mr. Bryan are going to reach out to Vital Statistics and the other departments to see if we can get a better handle on the VRISM system so that we understand a little bit better. It seems that the late death certificates may be a thing that's going to continue going on. It's been several that we had, and I think if we have a better understanding of it from a third party, we may be able to better review these things for the causes of what's going on within our members' funeral establishment. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's report. So, Mr. Gribble.
Morning, board members. As you recall, last month near the end of the meeting, there was a question came up about communications to licensees, and I've talked with Chief Counsel Glandorf, and we have two documents for you to look at today. The first one is one that was sent to each funeral establishment. Ms. Bohannon assisted with her communications team, worked with them, and one reason for sending that document was because of the complaints we were seeing about delayed death certificates and physicians not signing death certificates and things of that nature. So we worked with the Office of State Chief Medical Examiner and also Vital Records in sending this information. I know one of the Funeral Directors Association sent it to their members, but we thought it was important that each funeral establishment in the state receive it. So that was one of the communications that went out last week. And to address the concern about making the licensee more aware of the board and the participation in board members meetings and things of that nature, if you look at the next document, it's the third paragraph down is, and this is just a suggested language. Feel free to give us a directive as to how you want to go with it. But we said we want you to be a difference maker in the funeral profession. As a new licensee, we encourage you to keep up to date regarding activities during board meetings and actions taken by the board. We invite you to attend board meetings either in person or virtually. We live stream the meetings, and previous meetings are available to watch on demand. Additionally, minutes of the meetings from several years past are available for your review and benefit. Here is a link for public meeting information, which takes them back to the website for the board, where those minutes are posted and videos are posted. I think we go back 7, 8 years, maybe even longer than that, but it's a pretty significant amount of time that's available for licensees to go and watch and to learn from watching those board meetings and the actions the board takes in disciplinary matters. And if you have instructions now, or if you want me to go through the report and come back to that part, or what, the next item is the licensee report. That's a report of license administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority for the period of September 1, 2021 through October 15, 2021. And we do not have any closed establishments to report to the board at this meeting. Next is the disciplinary action report. And this is a report of consent orders that have been administratively accepted or approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority and reported on the August 2021 and September 2021 regulatory board disciplinary action reports. Those firms are listed there, in 2 firms and an individual, their violations and the amount of the civil penalty. And the complaint report, as of October 15, 2021, there were 35 complaints open. 14 of those were funeral director and or embalmer, and 21 of them related to establishments. So that concludes my report, and I'll be glad to answer questions or listen for instructions or directives.
Thank you, Mr. Gribble. Does the board have any input regarding the communication that is a part of the executive director's report?
I think the letter you've presented is very well written. Thank you.
Question on the letter, the paragraph that talks about notification of a change of address within 10 days. Does that apply to apprentices as well as licensees?
It's in the rule. I would assume it's applicable to all.
Okay.
Because it's a rule. It's not, I don't specifically refer to the rule. I just implore them to change their address, because that's how and it's very important for licensees. Of course, apprenticeships typically aren't renewable, but as far as a licensed general director and embalmer, if they don't change their address, then they're probably not going to get their renewal notice, and that will cause them to either be late or to let their license expire. So we try to encourage them to keep us informed, and there's no cost to do that. That's completely free for them to do it. There's an address change form in CORE that they can go in there and change it, or they can send us an email through the help desk system. Either way, we're glad to change it. We just always like to get the new address and have that available and updated to their file.
I need a motion to accept the executive director's report. Also move.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept the executive director's report as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. McKinney. We'll give you that, Mr.
I am awake over here.
You are awake.
I promise.
We'll give you that. We recognize Mr. McKinney today. Is there any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Scale Haynes, Clark McKinney, Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Mr. President, I have one other question for legal counsel. Since we didn't know Mr. Rahm was on early when we did the minutes, so they were adopted by voice vote. Is that okay, Mr. Glandolf, or do they need to do a roll call on the minutes to make sure that they were adopted?
I think the requirement is that if somebody is dialing in, that it should be by roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Gribble, for bringing that to our attention. So we're going to go back to the approval of the minutes And we're going to ask for a roll call vote for the approval of the minutes of our September 14th meeting.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skill Haynes, Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche, Charles Brom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The minutes were accepted.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Next item on the agenda are applications for licensure, and we do have an individual license application for Mr. Darrell Sinclair Young. Mr. Young, are you with us today? If you'll come forward to the podium that you see. We welcome you to our meeting, Mr. Young. Congratulations on reaching this stage in your career development, and we would invite you to address the board and share with us any remarks that you would like to share at this time.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Darrell Young. I work for MJ Edwards Funeral Home in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm seeking approval for my license in the funeral director and embalming.
How long have you worked with MJ Edwards, Mr. Young?
About a year and a half now.
So, Mr. Grill, in review of the application, meets all qualifications?
Yes, sir. Because of an answer to a question was the reason that Mr. Young is before you today for you to make a determination about his application.
Okay.
I'll make a motion we approve the application.
A motion by Mr. McKinney to approve the application of Mr. Young. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Haynes. Is there any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris, Tanya Skill Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rom,
Absolutely.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. And congratulations, Mr. Young. We look forward to hearing great things from you in the funeral service profession.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making the trip up here.
Now we have an establishment license application for Simple Cremation and Funeral Services. Do we have a representative present? Get back to the beginning here.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and board members. I'm sorry, morning time, I guess, still.
All right, I'm getting back to the beginning of your application. Bear with me just a
That's
moment.
okay. Take.
We have before us Mr. Gerald R. Bowen. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly,
That is
Mr.
correct.
Bowen?
Yes, sir, you are.
All right, sir. And as I understand, you will be the manager and the owner of this establishment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So would you like to share with us any personal remarks about yourself or about this application?
Absolutely. Just a little about myself. And again, thank y'all so much for allowing me to come here today. I really do appreciate it, your time. So just a little about myself. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I was recruited to play tennis for Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma several years ago. I majored in pastoral Christian ministries there. Started my seminary degree, but I just didn't get quite through it. Went on tour to play professional tennis, and after my world of being on tour, I decided that I wanted to become a funeral director. I had lost a lot of loved ones in my life, and went to a funeral service that was done pretty poorly. That was kind of my inspiration to want to get into funeral service. Always wanted to own a funeral home. Never really had intentions on just being a funeral director. It's just taken, of course, a lot of experience and time to get to this point today. After I got my license in Oklahoma in 2013, I was able to work for Dignity Memorial for several years, and of course I worked for a lot of mom and pop organizations. Coming here to Tennessee, I was hired on with Park Lawn Corporation Family Legacy Funeral Homes, if you all are aware of who they are. I was a floating funeral. Well, I started out as a pre-need counselor, and then of course was hired as a floating funeral director at Nashville Cremation Center, Nashville Funeral and Cremation, and then TriStar Cremation. Eventually, they asked me to manage TriStar location, in which I just left them recently. That's pretty much me, and with your approval, I would definitely appreciate your approval today, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. We appreciate you sharing those remarks with us. I did have one question for you, just a point of clarification. I believe I noticed on your general price list that it stated that you would have an on-site crematory at the bottom of that general price list. It said on-site crematory, and then I think a slash and on-site viewing, but I did not see any provision for an on-site crematory in the pictures of the establishment that you sent to us, or the premises that you sent to us. Could you just clarify that?
And I am sorry if that is the case. So Music City Mortuary will be doing all my cremations and my prep work, my embalmings. There will not be an on-site crematory. I do apologize.
All right, I appreciate the clarification. Would that also be true of the statement that follows that there would be on-site viewing? I didn't really see a space where you would have the ability to have a viewing of a body, physical body present. Would that also be the case there?
There is a space, but it wouldn't be used for that purpose. I will be doing my viewings, identifications, witness cremations through Music City Mortuary.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve this application, and then include that he send revised price list in where the on-site crematory, on-site viewing is deleted from his price list.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McKinney and a second by Mr. Berry to approve the application with provision that you would send us a corrected general price list, removing those two statements from the bottom of that price list.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Is there any other discussion? Any other questions for Mr. Bowen? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skill Haynes, Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon, and congratulations to you, Mr. Bowen. If this board may ever be of assistance to you, please reach out to us at any time or to Mr. Gribble in his office.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for
Thank you.
appearing today. Any new business that needs to be brought before the board today?
Mr. President, is next month's board meeting at the regular time?
No, sir, Mr. Rahm. As I understand it, the meeting today will also serve as our November meeting. We will not meet again until December.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for bringing that up as a reminder. Any other new business, Mr. Gribble, of which you are aware that needs to come before the board? Or
No, sir, not that I know of.
All right, sir. Board members, anything from you today that needs to be brought to our attention?
Move to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Mr. McKinney at 11:25. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second, so Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Skill Haynes, Clark McKinney,
No. Oh, yes.
Scotty
I've
Ford,
always wanted to do that.
Charles Rom,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon, and thank you, board members and staff. We appreciate your service today.